Welcome back to TheChowTimePod. It's your host, Red. I got a video today from Manosphere Highlights Daily. Men's rights activists versus feminism. Please like and subscribe down below. I really appreciate that. Let's get that chow. It's chow time.
Welcome to Manosphere Highlights Daily. In this video, I'm going to react to Jubilee's video titled Men's Rights Activists versus Feminists, Middle Ground.
So let's jump into our discussion between feminists and men's rights activists. Men already have all their rights.
Disclaimer. Before we dive in, I want to mention that to avoid copyright infringement on YouTube, we've made this video visually a bit choppy. But if you want to watch the original full video without interruptions, it's available on Patreon. The link to Jubilee's video is in the description. Now let's get into it. Today, we're focusing on the first statement. Men already have all their rights. First off, my answer to this question is no, and I'll elaborate more later. But for now, let's let them speak. Let's talk about it. Now it's time for us to get into this and do what we gotta do. Because we men.
Men already have all their rights. If you agree, step forward.
I hate the name men's rights activists because it does imply that as if our rights are being taken away. The problem that men face is more existential. The patriarchy conditions men or assigned male at birth people to pretty much just keep your feelings shut down. By age 10, your feelings don't matter. And then 12 through 13 and onwards, you just don't really feel like you matter much as a person. And I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that. Our rights aren't really under attack. Meanwhile, half of Congress hasn't codified Roe v. Wade. They're trying to control women's bodies, and it's just
Where the hell is he going with this?
ridiculous. Like, our rights aren't under attack, but a lot of women's rights are, and I think it's important that we fight for that.
You see, this is why you can't box the manosphere. We don't all share the same opinions, and we don't all have the same purpose, which is why we often disagree with each other.
We do.
He said,
I disagree with, like, what? Maybe a quarter of Manosphere / Red Pill creators. That I don't fully disagree with I fully agree with everything, but there are some that I do. And I think it's within their rights to think the way they do because they are seeing it differently than I am.
as men's rights are not under attack, and I call bullshit. Men are under attack, and to attack men, you have to take away their rights. They do this by neglecting and ignoring those rights. While men theoretically have equal rights on paper, the reality in practice is often very different. A prime example is family court and child custody battles. When parents divorce, the system tends to favor women by default, often granting them primary custody of the children. Fathers are left fighting just to have equal parenting time or even basic visitation rights. This bias isn't based on each parent's ability to care for the child, but on outdated gender norms where women are assumed to be the natural caregivers. So while men should have equal rights in these matters, the way the system operates shows they often have to go to court just to see the children they already have the right to see. Until the system is truly gender neutral and fathers aren't automatically at a disadvantage, we can't say men have all their rights.
I also think that there's a difference between like rights and inequalities.
Yeah, of course.
So I don't think that my rights being taken away. I think that's just an effect of patriarchy.
I agree.
We're not like losing our
This whole patriarchy talk is just making me like, okay.
bodily autonomy. We're not, fearing for our lives walking down a dark hallway, So I don't think they're comparable.
I agree.
Yeah.
You see, unequal treatment
Jitsu.
creates unequal rights. That's why we have men's rights activists in the first place, trying to change these inequalities.
Yeah, I think when you look at most of the world's leaders are men, most judges are men. Look at even our Supreme Court, there's 9 judges and how many are women? It's the fact that women had to fight and ask to, in 1970.
I don't think very many women wanted to be judges. Being a judge is quite hard.
Get access to have their own bank account. Like, That's absurd. That's absurd that, just because there's a little clause in the Constitution that says all men being equal, they're going to play dumb and act like that means just men. It doesn't mean human. And for women to have to fight for anything to be equal to a man is just...
It's ridiculous.
It proves that men have their right. They're the ones that set the rights. They're the ones that, if that's most of our Senate, our House, our Congress, everybody, they're the ones that vote over the laws and things that get passed. They have the rights, and they're the ones that dish them out to everybody else, and you're lucky if you can get them.
This is the feminist rhetoric that only surfaces after the world has already been built. Who built the freaking bank? And what was the purpose of having a bank in the first place? It's interesting to see how banks came into existence. You have to be careful when looking at the past with a modern lens. There was a time when people thought the Wright brothers were crazy for trying to build an airplane. You had to see it to believe it. Living conditions were vastly different back then. And as time and technology advanced, it made sense for women to have certain rights and occupy certain positions in the workforce. But to this day, women don't create jobs. They want to be in top positions. They complain about the glass ceiling, but they never talk about the glass cellar. Most men are not in the top 10 or even the top 5%.
And we also need to remember men's right activism. While they do have some genuine plights, it started out as a combatant to feminism. So I feel like they laid the groundwork off a very bad foundation.
No, I 100% agree. I think it's been hijacked by a lot of bad faith actors who blame women for problems that you should blame the patriarchy.
Exactly.
No.
Stop the foolishness. Feminists are never complaining about the patriarchy when it's time to go to family court. We all know women take advantage of this system. This space keeps growing because men keep getting burned by their ex-wives and baby mothers.
I feel like these men that are talking right now have not gone through the ringer that most men have of divorce court and things like that. That's why they feel like we're trying to take rights from women. No, there was no rights taken away from women. It was just rights taken away from the federal government. So states still had their rights to let you do what you wanted to do.
We recently had a case where a man had 50-50 custody of his child and still had to pay child support to the mother. Do you blame the patriarchy for her accepting that money? She could refuse it, but she doesn't. So it's not just the system that's broken. It's also the women who play a role in that broken system.
And it's very frustrating because I'm on this side because I think that there is genuine problems that I think need to be addressed.
Exactly.
I'm sure we can all agree on that.
What are some of those problems?
High suicide rates. Men are 4 times as likely to, I don't know what the TikTok version of the phrase is, but 4 times more likely. I think that's something that should be talked about more. I think that there's also, a lot of men are very hesitant to get rid of the notions of patriarchy, whereas I've noticed a lot of women or assigned female at birth people are very willing to just throw away any notions of femininity. I think a lot of men have a lot of emotional baggage from the patriarchy that they redirect at women, and it's not.
You're happy that women are throwing away their femininity? Is that what you just said right now? And then you're worried that men don't want to take femininity in because of what?
Not fair to them,
Right.
and it's also hurting us.
Right.
And the problem is for some men, all they have is their notion of masculinity to the point that they cannot let it go, and they can't see anything else other than that. When the actuality is, again, gender isn't real. We're just plants with complicated emotions. When I look at people,
You called yourself a plant, you freaking idiot. There are plants and animals at least, right? You could have called us at least an animal, but you literally called us a plant. So if I ate you, am I still a vegan then?
I just see human-shaped flowers.
What the hell is this dude talking about?
Right?
The question is, do men already have all of their rights? If you're approaching this from the standpoint that men need the right to be men, you have to understand that the biological aspect of being a man can't be ignored. The biological differences between men and women can't be overlooked. So, of course, men cannot let certain masculine traits go. It's ingrained in our system. Don't come here with that plant-based foolishness. Men are naturally attracted to the opposite sex, and nearly 1 in 3 young men aren't having sex. If 80-90% of men are being rejected by most women due to unrealistic expectations, what do you think that does to a man's psyche? Combine that with a society constant dunking on men for simply being men, and it's a recipe for disaster. Ask a woman what a man is supposed to be, and they can't even answer without contradicting themselves. They can't even define what a woman is. Women play a massive role in the confusion men face in modern society, and that's why they're getting roasted online. Men are tired of the foolishness. You can already see men opting out of the workforce in droves because the average man is not appreciated. That's why this space keeps growing. Men are looking for answers, guidance, and peace. Most importantly, they're looking for a place where they can just be men.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I would say that a lot of these men's rights activists, they're struggling. Like you said, they have high suicide or high self-deletion, whatever we're supposed to say, rates.
Men, not
laugh
men's
it off.
rights activists.
And the way they're coping with
unaliving
it,
themselves.
yeah, and the way that they're coping with it is by saying, okay, we're having this issue, so we need to put women back.
Exactly.
And,
It's not
and
fair.
be this, yeah, we need to take away their rights. We need this society to be.
We never asked to take. Well, okay, there's some of us that say take away women's voting rights and stuff, but I feel like that one's more of a joke than anything.
The way it was, where like all the rights that were afforded to people, it was men. Men are the first people to get rights, and then other people have to, especially white men, and then everyone else has to catch up to them. And because they're struggling, they go, oh, let's turn the clock back.
See, I hate that they do that. Like, there's a reason why white men were, because there was a white country. It makes sense for people to prioritize their own people in the country to get rights before random people. That's where I'm like, it makes sense. When you go to China, do you think as an American you're gonna be able to vote and do everything as a Chinese person can in China? It just makes sense.
Number one, that's impossible.
Yeah.
You're not going to turn the clock back. And number two, I don't think that's actually going to help the issue.
It's not going to
Yeah.
help.
She's clearly not well educated on this topic.
No.
When Cassie J made the Red Pill documentary, she came in with the same mindset that men's rights activists were trying to take women's rights away. Check this out.
If I never made this movie and I heard that there was a documentary screening about men's rights activists that didn't show them as monsters, I too would have protested the screenings or at least signed the petitions to ban the film because I was told that they were my enemy. I was told that men's rights activists were against women's equality. But all the men's rights activists I met support women's rights and are simply asking the question, why doesn't our society care about men's rights?
Men's rights activists are fighting for fairness and equal rights. But they are labeled toxic because equal rights for men don't benefit the government. Just follow the money and you'll see why. And of course, extreme opinions from certain content creators are going to get the most attention, leading people to label the entire manosphere as toxic.
This is probably why I don't grow like drastically fast, because I'm not so extreme or so shock and awe in my reactions and what I say, which I'm not that type of person anyways. I'm a very even keel, medium type person. So yes, what I show is usually the most loudest women out there, but it also is a decent representation of what's out there. Because even when I go out there myself in the dating market or out in the real life, I see these women. I hear these women. I literally go to like restaurants or other places and I hear these conversations or hear these rhetorics that women, oh, you're not gonna pay? All these types of things.
That's foolishness. The manosphere is decentralized. We don't have a leader.
Nope.
Listen to all, follow none. Personally, I believe not everyone should be allowed to vote just because they're 18 years old. The same way you're not allowed to drive just because you've hit a certain age.
Correct.
That's my opinion, not the opinion of the entire manosphere.
They should all.
I think, yeah, there should be some kind of test or something to allow you, like, okay, you made great judgment, you're allowed to vote.
They'll handle it.
On the suicide thing, I do think it's important to have a little bit of nuance that women actually attempt suicide
that's
far
true.
more often. The
That is
reason
true,
why men are
yes.
more successful as it is because they're more likely to own a firearm and use it.
Yes.
But in terms of like men fighting for rights, I think that like movements that attempt to fight for rights for particular groups, that sort of description should be exclusive to genuine social justice movements. You know, there may be disparities in ways in which the patriarchy does disadvantage men, but I think that you can't co-opt the language of it being a social justice or rights-based movement.
I disagree. This is exactly how the women's movement got hijacked by the sexual revolution. Sue Ellen Browder, a former journalist for Cosmopolitan, explained this in an interview and wrote a book about it.
Feminism was once a unifying movement calling for equal opportunity for women. That is, until feminism united with the sexual revolution in 1967 and reduced women to little more than career-focused sex objects.
The original feminist movement was about equal opportunities for women in education and the workforce. The sexual revolution, however, pushed for sexual freedoms like promoting sex without marriage and access to abortion, and ended up hijacking the movement. This blending of goals led to confusion about what feminism stands for today.
True.
Browder admitted writers like herself were instructed to fabricate stories to sell the sexual revolution to women, which over time undermined the core goals of feminism. So, no. Keep the men's rights movement specific to avoid confusion and hijacking for personal gain.
That's the problem is that like I have this thing I say. I feel like saying that like men have feelings is kind of like saying all lives matter, because men only ever bring up their problems directly after women bring up theirs.
Fuck you. You simp jitsu mother chucker. Really? Do you not have your own feelings? Do you not feel sad, upset, angry? What the?
So it just sounds dismissive. And that's the problem, is that for a lot of men, I think we feel so uncared for by society. We feel so like just like we don't really matter unless we prove our worth, that anytime any social movement gets any sort of traction, we just immediately just bum rush that.
And it really makes me wonder that there are rational men's rights activists, seeing as yourself, but are these people advocating, the bad actors, for women's rights to be peeled back for them to feel comfortable?
I think so, because I think the problem is that a lot of men, again, people who are so rooted in their gender bother me, because it only hurts you. It only hurts other people around you. It's kind of like the idea of like, because the problem is,
No, if you're actually rooted in your gender, you actually help you and you help the people around you because you're being genuine to yourself.
that men are allowed to express anger, but they're not allowed to express sadness.
Right.
Women are allowed to
Yeah.
express sadness, but you cannot express anger.
Or else they get called like a bitch.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never heard one men's rights activist talk about like men, the loneliness epidemic of men not having friends.
without
It's
blaming
always
women.
like women's
Exactly.
problem.
No, I agree.
They don't want to date you. They don't
Yeah,
want to
no, it's
like hook
stupid.
up
And they
with
never
you.
offer any
never talk about-
solutions.
yeah.
No solutions.
Exactly.
Why am I not surprised she's never heard a single men's rights activist talk about the loneliness epidemic? Like most people, she's only focused on that dating foolishness, which is the most popular topic in demand. She's confusing men's advocates with men's rights activists. This channel, here at Manosphere Highlights Daily, we're not men's rights activists. We're men's advocates. That's why we focus on men's issues, especially those related to the law and women's involvement. Issues like paternity fraud, family court, false rape accusations, domestic violence bias, Amber Heard. The list goes on. That's why we tell men to protect themselves, because the system doesn't work in their favor. It's not fair. And when it comes to solutions, there are plenty. You just don't like them and label them sexist.
True.
Change the damn laws. Paternity fraud should be a crime. False rape accusations should be a crime. 50-50 custody should be the standard. Women preventing children from seeing their biological father without plausible reason should be a crime. Child support agreements should be based on receipts. If the woman spends that money on things unrelated to the child, it's a crime. And women shouldn't be allowed to hit men. If it's not self-defense, it's a crime. Here are a few solutions that would make the world a better place.
So the perspective that I come from was about 3 years ago, I wanted to know why men didn't want to get married anymore. I kept hearing men say, I don't want to get married. And it kind of took me,
Pearl she's Pearl, but I don't fully hate on her.
down the rabbit hole of family court. I started interviewing men that had been what's called divorce raped. And I kept finding guy after guy after guy that lived a couple miles from his kids and could not see them. It goes back to men should have access to their children. It's 50% their DNA. They should get 50% custody off the bat. And right now, 90% of the time, women get custody. The question was, do men have all of their rights? How can I say that they have all of their rights when I'm finding guy after guy after guy that is devastated he can't talk to his children? I had one guy who the woman got custody and she ended up taking the kid to a different country, and now his kid doesn't speak his same language. He spent $300,000 trying to get that kid back.
I want to look at women's stories as to why they don't want to get married. And I could go interview 1,000 women. You're looking for these kinds of men.
Hold up. Is this her initial reaction or is this edited?
Just straight up pissed off that men don't get to see their children, and we have an issue with that.
It doesn't look good for her. Pearl was speaking facts, and this woman didn't even acknowledge what was said. She immediately twisted the context to suit her own perspective, which is clearly wrong. The question is, do men already have all of their rights? Men don't want to get married because the system is crooked. Women don't have this issue of losing their children in family court. You saw the stats on your screen.
What she's discussing are individual and yes, tragic cases, and we can acknowledge that. But what we're discussing is a systemic issue. On aggregate, men and women after divorce, women see a 27% decline in the reduction of their income. They're more likely to be in poverty, and they're less likely to get remarried.
If you go I caught it. It's definitely edited because you could hear Pearl's reaction get cut off. That's a shame, though. I would like to see the full debate.
Around the world, there are countries that have male-only conscription, countries that have higher pension ages for men. Countries like the US and Canada have certain welfare programs that men are excluded from, domestic violence laws, homeless laws. There are many cases where men do not have access to the same public welfare programs, tax-paid programs. And if you look at something like the draft in the US, people say, well, that's outdated, it doesn't happen anymore. But many countries in the world, included some that are considered like very first world progressive feminist countries, Austria, Finland, Switzerland, they have male-only conscription. And many countries have higher pension ages for men. So there are many examples of countries that have laws that directly discriminate against men. So do we have all the rights? I mean, no, we don't. In the US, I had to volunteer, well, not really volunteer, I wasn't given a choice, but I had to register for the draft. So that's a small example, but it's, one that still goes on today.
These women want nothing to do with the draft. Equality goes right.
I mean, the logic that men bring into these conversations is so solid. It is based in such facts that there's nothing these women or feminists can even really say to defend themselves against it, other than to gaslight and change the rhetoric or move the goalpost in a sense every time we talk about a subject.
Out the window when things get tough. You don't hear feminists complaining about women in Ukraine leaving the country while men are ordered to stay and fight. Equal rights mean equal fights.
Going back to the family court thing, because we want to talk about traditional relationships, and that's how it should be. The mom should stay home with the kids and the dad is the provider and all that. But then when it comes to the family court, we want to be like, oh, dads need 50% custody, but you don't even know your kid. You've been off providing all this time, and the only reason now you want 50%.
So because I was off providing, I don't care for my own offspring and child? Do you realize that rhetoric makes men we're just working ATMs? No, we have emotions. We actually care about our offsprings. That's why we work so hard.
Percent custody is because that's the only thing that still connects you to the woman, or whatever up reason you have, but it has nothing to do with the children at heart. It has to do with, I'm their father, I deserve 50% custody. But where were you the first 10, 15 years that we were raising the kids?
Okay. Ask women if they really want to trade places. Ask them if they prefer to have a stay-at-home dad while they become the primary breadwinners. Looking at modern families, it's clear traditional gender roles have shifted, but not the way many might expect. Let's take it a step further. Janice, read.
Among children in weekly non-parental care, 62% were in daycare centers, preschool, or pre-kindergarten, center-based care, 38% were cared for by relatives, and 20% were cared for in a private home by someone not related to them.
This shows that modern children spend more time in daycare because both parents are working, contradicting the idea that women are staying home to raise their children. So I don't get her rhetoric.
Well, I mean, her rhetoric is completely wrong, because we know only about 20% of women can actually stay home and be a stay-at-home wife and mother.
About men not being there for the first 10 to 15 years of their children's lives, especially when feminist rhetoric has ignored this for decades. Check this out.
A men's rights activist would say to me, men are far more likely to lose their child in a custody battle. And I would counter, well, because women are unfairly expected to be the caretaker, it's discrimination against women that women get custody more often. Yeah. I'm not proud of that.
I'm not denying that they need their mothers or their fathers more. Men and women complement each other. That is what I'm saying. Some men are more masculine, some women are more feminine. My girlfriend's more feminine, I'm more masculine. We go very well together because our values align.
What is feminine?
But hold on. What is feminine?
Let the man speak.
To me, she wants to take care of children. She wants to stay.
So that's feminine.
To me, it is. To me, it is. That is what I want in a woman. You can only speak from, I can name you the stats, but I'm talking about me. I'm talking as a person.
Name the stats.
So what about the stats where all the fathers who leave and don't pay child support? Isn't that far more common than these men who are on
Whoa. Where are you getting this from?
Men who
because
do
they're
get the
fighting for
rights.
custody, which they only do 50% less than women do. When men want primary custody, they only file the appropriate paperwork 40% of the time. Women do it over 80% of the time, and then they complain that they're not courts don't give you something that you're not asking for.
Courts don't give you something even though you ask for it. That's the problem. Even if men were to apply for it, we're not going to get it. That's why most men don't even try, because it costs money to try.
Period.
Last time I checked, it's expensive to go to court. And the fact that a father has to go to court just to see a glimpse of his own child shows how ridiculous this system is. These lawyers will advise mothers to be hostile and come up with all kinds of excuses to make the father's life a living hell. You shouldn't need to go to court for access to your own child, especially if you're the biological father who wants to be involved. Children need their fathers.
So what are you saying?
Men choose not to support their families. They waive responsibility. Many times.
That's very sexist to say that, to assume that fathers don't care about their kids.
No.
I mean,
It is very sexist.
Then why aren't they actively fighting for their kids?
They are. It wouldn't be an issue if it didn't happen. It's an issue for a reason. There are lawyers that specialize in this. They wouldn't have a business if it didn't happen.
I know, at least for you and possibly for Pro, you guys want to reaffirm traditional masculine roles, which does not assume that men are the nurturing ones. And if that's going to be the case, then you're going to continue to run into the problem where men aren't going to get custody because women are going to be seen as the nurturing.
Why is it like that? Are we not 50-50 custody? Are we not both of the parents' child, the child of the parent, or not both parents of that one child? Why does she get more just because she's a little bit more nurturing? Why are we playing the sexist role now and going with that gender-based role now? When you guys have been fighting, oh, you shouldn't be doing that because it's sexist. Then make it 50-50. It literally is not sexist. It is equal.
Gender.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So if you don't want that to be the case, then it makes sense to stand with feminists and want to dismantle those sorts of norms and expectations around what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman.
I would say it should be 50-50 custody off the bat.
It's twisted how male feminists spin this into an issue of traditional gender roles and men's lack of effort in family court instead of acknowledging the unequal treatment of men in the system. These same men will change their minds when they get burned by it. Like the dude said, it's an issue for a reason, just like men are opting out for a reason. And that's the heart of the issue. Men are opting out of certain systems and roles because of unfair treatment, especially in family court. It's a reality many men face, but it's often ignored in the mainstream. It's easy to dismiss men's concerns until you are the one feeling the sting of the system. Whether it's custody battles, paternity fraud, or societal expectations, men's
False accusations?
rights and issues remain a critical conversation. At the end of the day, it's not about taking sides. It's about seeking fairness and understanding the full picture. Men don't have all their rights if they are still being marginalized and attacked, directly or indirectly, by a system that overlooks their struggles. That's why we need these discussions. That's why men's advocates, men's rights activists, and spaces like this are growing. We're here to push back against ignorance and shine a light on what's really going on. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Patreon gang, salute!
Oh, male feminists. It's like they're literally women and seeing everything in women's eyes. It trips me out, and I understand why I dislike them so much, especially from that last video with the FE capital. Please subscribe them below. I really appreciate that. And catch you guys next time. Ciao.